Welcome to the Binding Mind podcast. My name is Lorenzo Salazar.
And I'm Ian Spector. Let's jump in.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey, Binding Minders. Thanks for joining me for another Ian's Interesting Facts. Signature colors can increase brand awareness by up to 80%. Colors can be chosen to evoke different feelings in clients. For example, blue represents confidence, and green, loyalty. Enjoy today's conversation. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Binding Minds. Today, our guest is founder and principal of the Infinite Agency, having been a part of building brands like Budweiser, ESPN, Smoothie King, and Very Desk. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us for an episode.
Welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we're super excited to have you on board, and I know you have definitely had the opportunity to work with great companies. But my question leading into this discussion is, has creative marketing or creative agency style, has that always been in the back of your mind, coming in? Because we learned that you were in a band, and then from a band you now have become into this agency world. So how did all that come to fruition?
Well, that's fun and embarrassing that you brought up the band date. We'll have to have an emo conversation later on in the show again. But man, I was a kid in school who frankly did not want to go to school. So I grew up, close to you guys. I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico. And, when I was young, I just wanted to get out. You know what I mean? Yeah. I was stuck in the desert, which is sad because now I look back and I look at that place with a lot of fondness, and it's a beautiful. I love West Texas and Eastern New Mexico and the desert, stuff like that. But I went to school and didn't want to go to college. And my mom was like, "You're going to college." I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to do music. I wanted to I just did not think corporate life was the life for me. And so I've kind of say that advertising found me and I didn't really find it. It just discovered it one day when I went to SMU. I went to Eastfield College for a couple of years, got some basics out of the way, and I was like, I think I'm good. I don't need to go anymore. And I got a scholarship to SMU, and my mom was like, "You're going." And of course, being from Roswell, I had no idea what SMU was, if there was any prestige around it or whatever. I didn't know what this school was all about. But in that process where I got to do the campus tour, they had this behind the glass, in the in the school hallway, there was these huge trophies in this campaign work that they had done for the state of Florida. And I remember looking at it and being like, "What is this?" It just piqued my interest as we were walking in the hallway. And the advisor said, "Oh, that's advertising." And they basically do creative stuff, like make videos, put cool designs together. And it's like communication arts, and they get to work with brands, and they try to present, and they kind of just explain to me the idea of what advertising was. And it hit home with me. I was like, I could do that. And, a couple of years later, I graduated and, won some awards in college and made some connections. And that's basically how I got my foot into advertising initially.
So did you have any background in any type of arts, or were you a great drawer, or was it just kind of in your mind, you can instantly come up with cool concepts or creative concepts out of the gate?
First off, I still don't think I am very talented on the creative side in certain regards. I'm still working on crafting my skill, but I think that's what it is. It's a craft. It's something that you just start to you kind of, have a inclination for it. And for me, I did before I was in school, really took an interest in design and started in design. And before I, was taught anything about design, was working in Photoshop and creating artwork for my band, right? And creating T-shirts. And when we were, playing music on the road, I would go find the other bands that we were touring with and try to get them to hire me to do all of their merchandising. And so I get to do all of their T-shirts and whatnot. And so that's kind of how I hustled and made money on the road. And then when I found advertising, I was like, this is somewhat related. And so it just kind of came in that way. It was fun to use what I had learned in the past and apply it in this area.
Well, and it's funny you talk about the bands and doing all that, which I didn't know that you looked to do some of their designs, but you mentioned something in an interview that we saw, that you would actually check other bands' MySpace, which kids who are in their 20s. MySpace used to be this platform that was kind of like Facebook, but a little bit older.
Predated.
Predated, yeah. And you would actually go to each of the bands that you were going to be playing with and learn a little bit about what their sound was. And you found it pretty fascinating that the ones that turned out great end up having a flow with their social media and then also with their audience as well. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that even their top 8 friends seemed to coincide with what the band's sound was. And I found that very interesting because that led into you wanting to find your voice as an agency.
Well, man, 100%. And like, it's funny that like oftentimes if I think back about, what got me into this industry, oftentimes I don't give music and like playing music in that era of my life, like enough credit, but it was definitely like a springboard into learning what I do today in advertising. And, back in that moment, which is really funny that we're talking about MySpace right now. God bless Tom and all that he did for the world in social media in those moments. But man, it was like the Wild West when you think about it. Like, and so as a band, like you could go on and everybody could like basically design their own pages. So imagine on Facebook or whatever you're going, or on your Instagram, if you hit your profile feed, instead of it just being like filled with pictures, whatever, you could literally design the HTML of the site. And that's how like a whole generation of people sort of like tinkered and learned how to code. And so like the bands that were doing really well, like they understood how to like, put their vibe together and their like sound together, and their sound matched their, look and feel and their visual aesthetic. And so, we took a page out of that and tried to do our best. And, now we look back and we're all embarrassed when we look at it. So
It's great.
Dude, that's the truth.
Imprint memory.
Dude, that's the truth. And, so I guess relating that to what you guys do now, I know I'm super impressed, followed you guys for a long time with what you guys do. That idea of what you saw other successful bands doing from at that point, the only social presence, I mean, that's something that maybe core value is too strong, but I think that's something that you guys do really, really well when it comes to your clients. It's not, well, we have a great plan and guide, so if you want to fit into our plan and guide, then work with us. It's, you guys have created you call it the continuum, which we'll talk about. I want to understand that a little bit more, but you guys have created this continuum that really speaks to who each of your clients are.
So like maybe to go back to the beginning, what you said, like when we started the agency, I got to start with these incredible founders, incredible entrepreneurs. And, the thing that was fun about our premise was, we were young kids, again, coming from a band, one of the other partners was like in ministry and another guy that we brought in as our first employee, which now is a partner and runs another part of our business, Infinite Digital. He came from like, the search engine optimization, website building space. But we really like started to build this idea of a bunch of kids. Like most agencies are built from like, somebody who leaves a big agency and they take a client and they take some people and they start their own little shop, and they have experience of knowing what an agency is supposed to do and what it feels like. And as I said, I didn't even have real context of what advertising was going into school. 2 years later, I'm out of school in advertising, and probably 4 years later, I'm co-founding an agency. And so we didn't know anything about what to do at all. But we had a vision that was unique because we saw the change in times. And that change was like that social media and digital media was going to just completely disrupt how brands are built. And the goal was to figure out like, how can we figure out how to put power back in the customer's hands and put the brand and how the brand is built and the perception and in the hands of the consumer in some way.
that whole concept of brand, of how that transition has happened in recent years. You hit it head on. I feel like in the same perspective of what I see things, as far as in an interview you did with USA Today, by saying that before companies would create brand and then consumers would sustain the brand, and then that would be an ongoing cycle. But now it's a lot of the consumer having a connection with the brand. One of the example that you used is if someone likes to go hunting or fishing, they don't wear a shirt that says, "Oh, I love to hunt or fish," or something along those lines. They go and use an outdoor company that sells their product. So there's a lot of more of a relationship connection now in today's world with brands.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sure you guys see this in, your business as well. And even in what you're creating, you're trying to find people that are interested in or identify with whatever it is that you're talking about. And I think there's a great book that I recommend from Marty Neumeyer. And frankly, all of his books are really good. He wrote a book called, I think I'm going to butcher his names, but it was like, you know, I think the brand flip is the one that I want to refer to here. But basically, he said like the way that we used to think was like brand puts out a message and it's consumed by the consumer. They buy products and it kind of circles back away for the brand to like do it again. And anymore, like it's really the consumers are putting out a message, and the brand's got to reflect and understand how the consumer sees themselves in the brand. And I like to call that like an identity brand. And you hear a lot about like identity politics, or like there's a lot of like negativity in some ways that can come from like us building an identity based society. But the truth is that we all see ourselves in the brands that we love. And like as I said, you don't usually wear a shirt that says I love to run. You wear a shirt that says Nike on it. And that's because you identify and the brands say something about you. And so our job as marketers is to get past what the business problem is and find out what the human problem is or the human desire is, and then try to show how the brand is a magnet for people that identify like that. And I think when you can tap into that space and brief on that specific goal, the creative just turns way better. Like oftentimes you get a bad client brief that gives you just a business problem to solve. And sometimes if you give that directive to creative people, then they're trying to reimagine the problem for a human scenario. But like sometimes in our world, I don't know if you have like clients like this or marketers like this that are like, we need to drive, sales. So push sales down everybody's throat. And sometimes that just actually does the opposite of what they want it to do, which is it destroys the value of what their brand could be, what it's creating, and don't get me wrong, like there is a human truth that everybody wants a deal, but it also, there's a way to do that and to try to like promote sales or promote revenue and value by using values. Like by using your values, people can find value in your brand. And I think that's what we try to build, right? Like as good marketers, that's what we all want to try to build for the brands that we work on.
And I think that's one of the deals too. Is I mean, we do it subconsciously as we're going to purchase a smoothie or find something to eat. You really want somebody who's along the same guidelines of what you're looking for. If you're in a fitness journey or if you're looking to purchase a home, nobody wants that thrown in their face like buy this, buy this, buy that. So that's a good point about it definitely has to be more in tune with what the user wants. And I do see that you all do a great job of really pushing that in social media, not only just displaying what the product is, but how the product can be pretty much the product seen in the user's perspective.
I mean, I think great marketers understand that. And I think there's a big question, and maybe that you guys would have an opinion on this, but like, I think the question right now comes in this world of consumer first. There's this like tension. And one idea is the consumer first model. Customer is always right. And it's basically a reflective model. And the other, and especially today's world, when you think of like an Amazon that are just like, get customer satisfaction, that's the score we care about, and push that up. And that's all that matters. But the other tension is brand building. And a great brand, has this point right now, this tension where they can either be a reflection of the consumer or they can be a magnet. And what do you think? Like, what do you want the brand to be? A reflection of you, or do you want it to be a magnet for you? And I think that's sometimes a step that a good brand needs to sit on a stump and really think about of how you accomplish both of those things potentially, or how do you craft a magnet that other people see themselves in? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, have you had, felt that tension as well?
Yeah, so big into the outdoors, not on the hiking or exercise side, big into the hunting space. And there are a couple hunting brands. Kuiu is one of them. They just opened a store in Dallas. But Kuiu has created that. They have created a magnet, but they have also created a brand that you identify with. It's like the people that are purchasing and using this, which at its inception was just camo. right? Which you can get anywhere. I mean, Realtree and everybody else started this. It's been around for years. But it has created this identity to the point where, like on Fridays, my casual wear is normally Kuyu. And it has become synonymous with what I desire for myself. And so I think that's a great example of a brand that has done exactly what you're talking about, that has created a magnet that also shows people something that they are willing or desire to be a part of it, and have, like, wear on their sleeve, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, physically and interpretively.
Yeah, it's easy to do that. I think with clothing, because it's like why else are you wearing? So you either like the style, but oftentimes even liking the style, it's because you like the kind of the brand as a whole. And I think that man, it's interesting because like there is a moment where a brand does need to understand their consumer, but on the creative side, it's about like how do we then create a magnet that is an environment, a world where that type of personality and that person can live. And so as people start to like see themselves in the brand versus just see a reflection of themselves. And that to me, this is like a small tension between what makes a creative piece or an advertisement great versus okay. Does it just reflect the consumer in where they are right now? Or does it invite them into the world in which they want to be, right? There's got to be that aspirational approach. And so, we hope to try to bring that, to light when we work with brands.
Now, working with brands, with different clientele and different industries, how do you handle those particular companies in the industry that says, well, this has worked for us for 20, 30 years. There's no reason we really need to change it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But they are asking you for assistance and, hey, help bring in a little bit more creative aspect to our brand.
Man, that's a great question. Like, I'm sure we all have clients that we would rather, be more bold than.
I ask because we go through this all the time, and we're just like, well, if you're asking for our help, you have to listen.
We're asking for a friend, and we're the friend.
Yeah. Boy, that is so hard. I think there's two components here. One is just humility. And like I say this a lot because like, we as marketers oftentimes think like we've got the answer. And I try to teach my team because we have a lot of young people that come in and they're like, creatively bold and like they've got like a prowess around their thinking and they're confident in it. And sometimes they haven't sat across the table from somebody who has maybe more knowledge or like experience in certain areas that they need to actually learn from before they criticize or critique. And so the first thing I try to tell my team is like, just listen and understand like what the person not just is asking, but what the intention around that ask or behind that ask is. Like maybe it's not that they don't see your vision, on your creative, production. Maybe it's just that they are like, this one's going to be more easy to attain in the budget that I haven't even told you yet. And so like there may be feedback components that like are not said that we need to hear and learn, from a humility aspect. Now at the same time, the other side of the coin is so hard.
I'm listening. And
that's where it's like when a brand like this is the way they've done it, and you're trying your best to help them. I mean, like I've got one conversation with a client right now that has so much potential, and they're excited because they've been stuck in like comp ruts, year over year, and there are just like some simple things that we're like, hey, we can tackle and help you in this way. But like, we've got to like, if we do what we did last time, and if all of the feedback comes back to exactly what we've always done, then we didn't do our job right. And you hired us for a reason, is to bring a voice of an outside perspective. And so that's a talent that takes time, I think, to learn and how to like position that with the client. And a lot of that just built on just gotta win trust, and I think trying to be vulnerable with the client to say, God, I don't know. What do you think? Like if you can show vulnerability where they trust you, then when the time comes where you're like, listen, I hear that you want it to be bright yellow, but I have this other idea that may, fit your market better, or that may take you to, another space. Could you give me the trust on this area to be bold or to be creative? And I think that like you've got to win the relationship and the trust of the client to be able then to have the acumen to go and say, listen to me. Because that's a tough thing, man. Like how many times have you had somebody that's like an intern come in and like try to tell you something like you don't know anything? Like even if they said the right answer, sometimes like, I don't know yet. Like I'm going to check you on that one,
Right.
So it's, I think we all have to figure out how to like learn from, the person across the table. Like I try to tell our team, we don't want to be a team of know-it-alls. We should be a team of learn-it-alls. And I heard this on a podcast the other day, from I think the founders of, I can't remember. I'll find it later. But it was such an impactful thing because their amount of success was huge. You would think that these people are just complete experts in their field, and they are, but they still look at it from, response of humility and of the idea that we still want to be curious and learn because we don't know everything.
That humility and curiosity and listening that you're talking about, I think that goes a long way and probably a lot farther in trust building. In an instance where, let's say, you're approached with a client that wants to work with you, it's so easy to think like, oh, this person wants to be here, so they want my input and they want my style and they want this, and but there's still trust to be gained there. There's still, that's not how a relationship is built. Is if one party comes to another, it's not like, all right, we're square. There's still plenty of foundation to be laid. But once that foundation is laid, you guys are really able to voice what you hear. Something that's coming to mind is the billboard ads you guys did for Amex in Dallas and Fort Worth. Man, I loved the idea behind this. It was a great form of, in my opinion, indirect marketing. This had truthfully nothing to do with Amex other than their logo was on it, but it was pitting, Fort Worth drivers and Dallas drivers. For those who haven't seen it, y'all go to the link there. It's on their LinkedIn page, the Infinite Agency, but it was great, right? In Fort Worth, it was like, watch out for those crazy Dallas drivers. And in Dallas, it was like, watch out for those Fort Worth slowpokes or whatever it was. And you guys created conversations because at that point you understood what Amex was looking for. And they were looking to be different and looking to be a conversation piece because people sit around and talk about insurance. Well, Lorenzo and I have talked about insurance a little bit more than most here recently.
You just pretty much revealed our age. We're in that age group.
I would say in normal circumstances, people don't go to their friends' houses or go out, for happy hour and be like, "Hey, are you happy with your insurance company?"
Yeah, we're the Will Ferrell in the old school movie. Yeah. That's where we're at.
But man, I loved that. I loved you created something memorable that people were like, "Did you see that Amex billboard?"
Man, well, first off, I'm humbled, and so thank you. But I honestly has nothing to do with me. My team, creative team, Alan and Tim and Danny, they just did a fantastic job, building that campaign and listening to the insights. What's funny about a brand in that type of category, that type of space, is it's very driven by the bottom of the funnel, and that space as a whole, like you said. You don't want to think about insurance. If you're having to think about insurance, that is not the day that I want to have. If I'm thinking about a car wreck or I'm thinking about, I've got to switch insurance providers or look at all these different premiums and figure out what's in the middle. And so that aspect is people don't want to think about it until it's time to think about. And so, our job is to figure out, we did it, I think with Amex in particular, we had a strong, and that client over there, Tasha, is freaking smart. Honestly, she's a brilliant client. She comes from a ton of experience in performance marketing. And so right away, we needed to figure out how do we fill that bottom funnel? And so the first task that we actually had with them was how do we make sure that the people that are raising their hands in that moment of need or that irritation moment when it's time to look at car insurance, that you're there. And she's built an incredible, platform. And I think we've really assisted her and really tried to drive those leads. of people that are looking for something, inexpensive, or looking for, something that suits their specific needs. But then outside of that, once that was, I don't want to say completely tapped, but there's this thing that happens, and this is really good for any marketer that's out there, especially if you come from the performance side or you deal with performance marketers, is like there's only so much of that you can capture before you have to start filling the top of the funnel. And by top of the funnel, I mean like people aren't going to Google your brand if they've never heard of it. Like people aren't going to get to know you if they don't know your name. And I think this is the area where like we started learning that is as we filled the top of the funnel, then people started getting driven down to the bottom of the funnel, and all of their customer acquisition costs, could then start to like, lower because we were filling, some of the top of the funnel. And so I think that the way in which you measure that and the way in which you think about that is really smart. To the billboard specifically, like the insight is, I think funny and easy, and pitting Dallas versus Fort Worth we thought was a clever joke. And I think the insight is really what like made that campaign worthwhile. And anytime something gets picked up on Reddit, you've done a good job. So
Well, and even speaking about Reddit, you had mentioned that the messaging that you have for Instagram, Facebook, and Reddit, they're not all going to look the same. They are going to be, customized to each platform, because each platform will have its own significant way of delivering the message. So I found that pretty interesting in doing some of the research. And even thinking about insurance as we're talking about it now, I mean, think about like Geico and State Farm. They don't necessarily talk too much about the different plans they do. You just know Jake, and then the gecko and all those small little, fun deals they do. So, I mean, that's a really good point about the funnel analogy on that. And so this particular podcast, I mean, we're always trying to learn, and that's how it came to fruition, is discussing with different people about, as such as yourself and other folks in creative marketing. And this is kind of our platform to learn and stay and not necessarily stay ahead, but learn about the different trends and things. So how do you and your team, stay with the trends and kind of see how everything else is growing as far as the industry?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think staying up with trends can be super difficult, right? Because it constantly changes, and if you're getting older, sometimes I don't know if you see some trends that are like, for me, I'll have like some of our social media people come up and say like, "Oh my God, here's this thing," and I'm like, "Why are we doing this? Why is this on my feed right now?" And I start to feel like so detached. So it's changing constantly. So, I think it's the heart of learning and curiosity that's going to actually keep you engaged in, learning what's up and coming. We find for brands, like we want to get in front and ride a wave of a trend that's about to happen. One of our clients that I think is just so strong is the CMO of Smoothie King. Her name is Marianne Radley, and she was like, the head of Budweiser for a while, head of Monster Energy for a while. I mean, she's got like skins on the wall and is a fantastic marketer. And she really challenged us to say like, hey, I want to know like what's coming before it hits. Like, I want to know what is the wave that we can ride? And I don't want to just like bounce and give the same trends that everybody else is doing on the same dates, so that you go to your social feed and you're just another one of the brands copying the other brands that's copying the other brands. She's like, we got to get in front of the trend and see when it's happening. And so, for us, we use a couple technologies and tools to kind of like, keep our pulse on what's going on social media, but also just being like in tune with culture, like what's going on in culture, what conversations are happening right now that a brand can be a part of. And when you kind of like learn who your audience is, you start to learn that there's communities around that audience. There are people that like are passionately in love with really niche things, right? Like, it doesn't matter what brand you're in. Like, we have one of our brands that I'm super stoked about right now is Six Flags. And it was so enlightening to me to see that there's these people out there called Thuzies. And Thuzies are basically roller coaster enthusiasts. And when they go deep into like roller coaster content and like roller coaster, like how it's made and where it's made from, and what company did they order from, or who designed this coaster versus that coaster, and they can comment and call out on our social feeds which theme park in whatever country, even if the ad doesn't say it, they can call out which like roller coaster that is and what city it's in. which is pretty unique. And so you find that like once you understand this community, like what is the other content that they would be interested in, you know? And so like we built out a couple, you know, pieces of content that went viral that was really interesting. Was like, you know, we made like miniature versions, little big plastic versions of the giant roller coaster, you know, did a trend or a, you know, a treatment where, you know, somebody would throw the little toy up in the air and it would plop down and it was like the full roller coaster. And it was just like little simple insights like that about, hey, there's this community out there that loves this thing. How do we show them that we are not just going to reflect that back to them, but we're going to lead them to a world that they have never imagined, full of coasters and excitement, you know? And so that was a big insight, you know, is how to like bring that to the table, you know? And then with that, the other thing that's really interesting, as I mentioned, Six Flags, is like everybody we asked, and I'll maybe ask you, like, do you remember, like, what do you remember about Six Flags? Have y'all been ever?
Superman
roller coaster, Batman. Thinking about as a childhood going there and seeing the smaller rides, and it's definitely a staycation per se for us Texans. You know, have a little staycation here in Texas. But yeah, I mean, just enjoying fun of the large rides for us.
I also remember not getting nearly the amount of food and snacks that I saw and wanted. 100% good call on my parents' part, but
I guess I could join that camp as well. Man, what's funny about Six Flags is like how many of us have like really cool stories, like nostalgic stories and memories. Maybe it's the first time you held your girlfriend's hand, or maybe it was that like, you know, trip that you took with your family, and got away as like a staycation. Like people have like really deep memories at these theme parks. And so we wanted to like make sure that, you know, we weren't forgotten. You know what I mean? The brand has been through a lot. COVID hit. Nobody could go to the parks. So they really had to like rebuild, you know, their customer base in a lot of ways. And so a couple of the insights that we really worked through was like when asking people about Six Flags, a couple of things came up. And right away, there was an advertisement that you may remember from Six Flags that everybody just recalls, which is the dancing bald guy, right? It was a famous song.
Yeah.
Yes. So people knew this you know, this part of the brand. And while we I mean, I'm just going to be, you know, inside baseball, you know, we were kind of exploring the opportunity, doing some research, like, is this the moment where we could maybe bring this, you know, kind of figure back, or could we help, you know, look at the history of the brand and find unique pieces to bring forward. And so one of the things that we got to do in our recent campaign, if you'll hear it, it'll be out, you know, in the Olympics, is we went and relicensed the old Venga Boys song, that dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
And we basically created that as the bed for all of the songs. And so what was so cool about it when we tested it, people they could hear the song and they would say, oh, Six Flags. And we didn't even have to tell them the brand. And it's just amazing how like that audio gets stuck in your head. And there's little things like that. Every brand has these components that make the brand powerful, these like little nuggets. And if you're able to uncover that, then all of a sudden, like, you don't have to do as much heavy lifting. And so the amount of comments that people started like putting in our first post that kind of teased out that we're bringing back the Venga Boys "We Like to Party" song, like our comments in our feeds went crazy with people putting gifs of Mr. Six dancing and commenting on, oh my gosh, get ready for nostalgia. Like Six Flags has entered the chat. People were ready for something unique. And it really brought back a lot of those feelings that people have at Six Flags to the brand and made them relevant today. And so I know we started talking about trends, but a lot of times trends are about like, you know, right now nostalgia is a trend for Gen Z. So we want to tap into like, what is it that they're like looking for? And it's just these moments of comfort, these moments of, you know, looking at their older brothers and sisters or their parents who are millennials, and they're reaching back and pulling these golden nuggets from our old eras into today. And so we try to look for that in our advertising. And while that trend isn't a forward-looking trend, it's about understanding where the consumer is today.
But you guys also, I think, did a great job of harnessing and tapping into Gen Zs as well in that aspect, specifically with Six Flags. It's what you guys did utilizing and really, I will call it harnessing AI. So many people, you know, as AI has come out, everyone is worried about it. It's going to take our job. Well, what's it going to replace? It's like, our designers going to be necessary anymore? And so much of that conversation has been negative. But I mean, you guys did a fantastic job of, you know, creating the TikTok filters and really utilizing AI to not just hit the nostalgia, the millennial demographic, but hitting that Gen Z demographic that's kind of in the middle that, some of them may have kids, some of them may not. But I mean, you guys hit those demographics really well. And truthfully, maybe one of the first, maybe noticeable uses of AI for a benefit, not just everyone talking about, is it taking my job or not?
Boy, a podcast. It's a podcast when we start talking about AI during the middle of the podcast. I guess we could go on and on about this. I appreciate the kudos to that. So with that campaign, we launched this AI version, for Six Flags, for Fright Fest in particular. The insight there was like, people just want to get the ever-loving crap scared out of them. I mean, that's why you go, and people love Fright Fest. It's literally like, I didn't know this, but this is the largest event at Six Flags is Fright Fest. More people go during that time of year than any other time of year, and which is just crazy, right? It's like it's very thrilling. I'll put it that way. And so one of our tasks was like, how do we, the brand has advertised this for years. Usually it's like, let's just show the next haunted house, and what do we do that's unique and different? And so our team basically, took some cues from AI and basically made an entire dream world around what does it look like, heading to Fright Fest. And it's, scary, it's scarier than you could imagine is kind of the idea, right? And I think that it went over really well. It won some awards. We were excited to see it. The brand was really happy with it. And our team did a great job. I'll give Omar and Tim and Danny and our team credit on that side.
It is amazing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you could go.
I was gonna say, it's amazing to hear from a principal and a founder how uplifting of your team you are. I think it shows a lot about your leadership style. Lorenzo, go ahead, but I would love to hear a little bit more about like your leadership theories here in a second.
Yeah, well, just real quick on AI. I know at a conference I was just at, they did mention a lot of times for individuals, it's not that AI will replace individuals, but it will replace individuals who are not familiar with AI. As you mentioned, we're kind of in a industry to where digital media platforms and all that are taking over. So, I mean, it was really cool to see how y'all executed that particular campaign with Six Flags. It really did give FOMO type feels just on the experience that the individuals had. But yeah, to Ian's point, I mean, definitely your leadership skills with your team. What are some of the theories that you do throw out? Or Ian, if you want to emphasize a little bit more on that.
Oh, I'm just curious about, you mentioned earlier how many young, go-getting, red line out of the gate, creatives and people that you see, which are obviously, and I think those are the people that, you're drawn to, because it's like if somebody has drive and has that want to really, hammer down out of the gate, those are the kind of people you see that you see helping push what you're doing from an agency standpoint. But what is it like to lead people like that?
Well, I'm still learning, and we're still trying to figure out, the best way for every circumstance. I mean, I think, we've touched on the ability to be curious, before, but like, that kind of goes hand in hand. If you're curious and you're willing to learn, that means the action of that is evolving. And like for every moment in every era, the agency, may need something else. And there are moments that we've had, like tough moments, where we needed like, different, writers I've picked up on before said sometimes there's like wartime CEOs and there's peacetime CEOs. And sometimes you've got to be if you're going to be having longevity, you got to know what it's like living in both of those worlds, where sometimes it's back down the hatches. You need the best out of the best people. You got to learn how to like inspire them, keep them, everybody motivated, to be driven on one focused goal. And then in peacetime, it's like, how do we continue to raise the ceiling, expand our territory, make sure that we're making, bigger progress. And I think that every moment comes with those different types of, learnings and opportunities.
Go ahead. Many
Many
times I know certain failures people may see it as a negative, but I'm sure, and you can emphasize on this, and certain failures that you may have gone through in your career has been a great learning curve for you to be able to provide to the next generation or to your younger team.
100%. I mean, failure is a brutal teacher. And, in the agency world, you learn to like have thick skin. If you're a creative and, people put a lot of effort into their art and time and energy into it, sometimes they can hold on to it in too deep of a way, and like that could be a failure in and of itself when you actually look at a loss of a client or a loss of a pitch, or somebody didn't pick my concept, or I got horrible feedback from the client. Oftentimes people will look at that as a failure, but I think the learning is like, don't ever look at that as a failure. Say thank you. What can you learn? And then what can we gain from that? And I think that there's a lot of the failures that we've had over the years, or the times where you lose a client, that you ask yourself, well, what did we learn from this? How do we grow? How do we fix our challenges? And sometimes you also learn that like things can be out of your control, and now it's how we respond to it. And I think that's hopefully what kind of ethos and value that we bring to our team. When we bring our team members in, like if you what I hear you asking also is just like building a team and building an agency. Really, it's about culture. Like if at the end of the day you can get a culture that isn't set from the top and stated like, oh, this is who we are, so you do this. It's really got to be something that everyone shares. We actually call it shared values, because if there's everybody got like a different set of values, but like there are certain values that we as a collective need to share so that we're strong. And I think that when we start at that place, it really helps build a cohesive team. And also it helps people either self-eliminate by saying, man, that's not a fit for me. That's not how I like to work. Or, people self-select for it and they say, oh, that's what I want to be a part of. And so, we've got 5, shared values that we really, instill with our team. And what's cool about it, this team helped to write these values. And we did a big survey, and like through 2020, in that like moment, we brought the entire team in and had everybody like write down, what is a personality trait in a team, in one of your teammates that you want to make sure that you replicate in new people that we hire. We kind of phrased these prompts in that way. So people would write down, curiosities we've mentioned, or like, the ability to like, deliver great work. And they would write down that characteristic. And then we had them write down the name of the person, who that was. Right. And in doing so, like we kind of filtered through, and all of a sudden, like these 5 values really became obvious to the team. And so when we started and set that up, like I think any leader, it is their job to sit down. And that doesn't mean you have to be the CEO of an organization or the president, even if you're just like the CMO or a director of marketing. But if you are leading a team, I encourage you sit down with that team and define out what are the values that you really want to hold fast to. And that can be everything from soft values to like, more specific things. But that together will create a cohesive team and allow the values themselves to help guide decision making. And the values are there when there's not a black and white answer. When you have a client ask you to do something and you're like, I'm not exactly sure how we should approach this. Well, then you can ask yourself, like, what do our values say we do? And that gives a leader there when you are as a leader or not.
I think it's great that you actually.
I'm kind of speechless.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that you give that opportunity to have those shared values, because many people in the agency or creatives may feel like they don't have a voice to be able to give their perspective. And what it sounds like to me is there's probably not a lot of turnover in your agency, which, I mean, every company has turnover, but whenever you're a part of a company, it really does become more of of just like an emotional connection. And like you said, a shared value to be a part of. So is there something environmental wise that you do? Like, I mean, is there kind of like a relaxed setting that y'all have within the agency?
You guys have any sleep pods or anything like that?
Culture is not how many sleep pods you had. I've learned that. I will say, man, we've been through moments where, we've lost and lost great people, and it's been, it's hard. And I think any leader organization goes through these moments where you always question, what do we do? Or should we have done something better? Is it personal or is it not personal? It could be anything. And, I think for us, like, we want to cultivate and bring the best people in. And we're in a moment right now. And I think I give just so much credit to Josh Jones, who's like, over our, operations of our team. And man, the guy has done such an incredible job onboarding, making sure that people are heard and making sure that the team is set. And, I don't think our retention has just skyrocketed over the last few years. Like I think it's been almost we're going on like 12 months of not losing one person, only adding people. And I think that's in an agency world, it's very, very difficult to do. We won best places to work this past year, which we were very excited about. And really a lot of it's just listening to the team, trying to give them what we can and being open and honest about areas where we're failing, failing may be a strong word, but areas where you're falling short, we got to use those as opportunities, to grow. We do something that, and this is another thing I would give, if you got marketers or, leaders here listening on the podcast, like, I would encourage y'all, like, to have a time and a moment, a space, as you mentioned, where people can hear positive reinforcement from others. And we've done this since like day one at the agency. We call it wins and opportunities. We call it WAPs. And every Thursday the entire agency gets together, and it's completely open forum. And we brag on each other, and we just say, today I want to brag on, Jillian over here because she delivered excellence on this campaign, or I really want to, call out Kai for, owning growth in this moment because, the client said this and he did that. And when that happens, and it's not like led by the leaders of the organization, while we participate and we are vocal, the majority of these meetings can last 30, 45 minutes of just 60 people calling each other out, saying, you did a great job here. You did an amazing job there. You did an amazing job there. And when one of the biggest joys I get in my job is that meeting where I watch people's faces light up, because in marketing, we often do a thankless job, that we are working on hours that nobody gives a crap about. We're working on something that's going to get 17 edits, and our job is to grit our teeth and serve joyfully, right? And so and that's one of our values as well, serving joyfully. It's about how do we just say, like, you are here to help somebody else be successful. And when we call that back out and we give that positivity back to them, to let somebody know that you're seen and that you're valued, is something that I hope echoes through the hallways of our office. I hope it echoes through a Zoom call when we're across the screen from a client. I hope that they see that energy from us and when they get to work with us. And I think that's what builds a strong team.
What you guys put out as far as, like, the messaging, the initial messaging where a prospective client may come to your website, the values that you talk about, those are there too. The fact that you also you're not just saying, I will, I as the Infinite Agency, our team will do this for you. You also have a desire to do that for yourself.
Internally.
Like, to me, that shows an ultimate buy-in on what you're doing and what the agency is doing and what every employee that works there is doing. There are plenty of companies that will say one thing and do another, right? It's, we're for this, we're for sustainability, we're whatever. And it's like, you're for sustainability, but you don't recycle. That was a dumb analogy.
Some client's going to call you on that. I'm pretty sure somebody, are you talking about me?
Right. Yeah. How much paper do y'all use? And so, but like, that intangible, that is something that until you truly get to have a conversation with somebody on your team, have a conversation like this, or see that firsthand, man, that is something that behind the scenes, in my opinion, breeds that culture that you desire. But your culture and what you're putting out also align, which again is exactly what you guys desire to learn about any client that would like to work with you, work with the agency. And that's, to hear that is actually full circle, man, that's cool. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people that would say they would like to be that way, but that's an aspiration.
Well, man, I appreciate that. And that's right back at you. I mean, I've gotten the blessing to be able to work with Slate and y'all's culture and team, and the ability for y'all just to continue to learn. Y'all have great leadership over there, and I know that y'all are doing great things. And I see the same thing, and it's cool to connect with people that have that same type of same type of values.
Thanks, man.
Well, and it shows in y'all's work as well. So, I mean, just to kind of get a little bit more insight of what the culture is like in your team. I mean, that hand in hand, like Ian said, matches up. And we're already coming close to the end of this podcast. So one of the questions that we like to ask everybody at the very last question is, what's a piece of advice you will never forget? Something that someone's given to you, could be something small that you've really have carried on, through your humble journey in the agency world.
Oh man, there's so, it's one of those deals where I probably have like a page full of that, and then somebody asks you and you're like,
What?
Go ahead.
No, and you hit it on the head early on when you had mentioned that at SMU you had seen that particular piece and really got to analyze it, and you thought to yourself, man, that's something that I definitely want to look into, and that's what that question's all about, is just to definitely there are certain things that we carry on with us that we don't even realize that we teach to others, and that's just something we definitely like to have our the person we're interviewing share, just to help carry that on.
I think one piece of advice that I think is true in life and in all other facets is like a phrase that my mom used to tell me a lot, which is, this too is going to pass. And whether that you've probably heard, these little allegories of I think it was like a Chinese farmer whose, horse comes one day and they say, oh, you're like, how great. Like, that's so exciting. And he goes, maybe. And then the next day, his horse leaves. Anyway, it's a long story. I'm not going to get to the allegory, but the bottom line is like everything could be positive. Like, every day could bring something new, and don't get too comfortable in the good times, and know that the bad times will pass too. Because it's easy to get caught up. And if you think that every day is going to be like perfect and like the graphs are always going to go up, then you haven't built the fortitude and the strength to like stand it and be ready for when, that changes. And similarly, like if you're in a negative time, like you can go into a death spiral of like, this sucks and that sucks and this is a problem and that is a problem, and I think as marketers, sometimes creative people, I see that in them. It's like a default mechanism of like, things just suck and the world is not great and everybody's against me. And that mentality, if you stay in that mentality, doesn't lead to great places. And so no matter what is going on externally, whether good or bad, know that that is also going to pass. And so when you think about it in those terms, you start saying, well, then what doesn't pass? And let's build and put value and investment and time and energy into the things that don't pass away. And that's what we like to call a lasting impression, right? Make something that lasts, longer than, the moments that we have.
I think in our industry, we tend to fall into those places more often than not, because I'm sure you're in the same boat. If you're on vacation, or no matter where you're at in your personal life, you're going to constantly have certain tasks or people calling, and that sometimes be daunting. So that is a great piece of advice.
I needed that. I mean, just totally transparent and honest. Like, dude, I needed that. All of this was worth it for me.
No, he was saying it. I was like, this is good. This is good, just for eternally.
If nobody listens, I'm glad we had this conversation. Not that I think that's going to be the case, but man, thank you for sharing that. Personal level, I needed that.
What about you guys? Like, so you've done this now for quite a bit of time. What has come back to you as like, here's the best tip that I've learned, or the tip that somebody's told me that you carry with you?
Go ahead, Ian.
Thanks. Man, so we've done this for a couple seasons. This is our second season. Our very first episode, Lorenzo and I both shared a piece of advice I'll never forget. And I want to reiterate that advice again. I think it's still the best piece of advice I've ever been given. And it was given to me by, he's a retired bull rider. He's not old, but he's a retired bull rider. And he a lot of times says to me, he's like, Ian, you just got to want it. And so from an advice standpoint, that has still stuck with me. Man, from the podcast standpoint, I've mentioned this guy a couple times, Daniel Whittington with the Wizard Academy in Austin. That guy rocked my world. I was 100% content with thinking that I am a analytical ones and zeros kind of guy. I know marketing and I've got, but it's from a ones and zeros standpoint. Data and numbers are my way of attacking marketing. And that guy rocked my world when he told me that we align a lot like what you've talked about with something that we are closest to. And so it's not that I am not creative, and it is not that I'm not a dreamer. It is that I have aligned myself with something that I can identify as, and which was an analytical marketer. And so that has been, that was super eye-opening for me.
That's great advice.
Yeah. And so for me, it's always be an 80-20. And what that means is 80% listening, 20% talking. I think a lot of times in this industry, we can fall into an imposter syndrome. And that's where we feel like we're truly not, for instance, we're truly not meant to be podcasters, where we don't feel like we're qualified for it. And I think what we've learned over the last couple of years is the more conversations that we've had and the more we've been listening to each individual, we've taken a lot of information that that's actually has had individuals reach out to us and be like, hey, can I get your thoughts on this? Or hey, what do you think about doing this concept? And they come back and say, wow, you guys really know what y'all know y'all stuff. And truly and honestly, it's like, it's not that. I just have had the privilege of speaking with individuals that have allowed us to retain the knowledge and convey it, just to allow others to learn from one another. And there's no such thing as an original idea in today's world. That is, it's all about just connecting things together. And we just want to be that platform where people can come and learn from the discussions that we have on this podcast.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And, this hour has flown by for us, and it was just the great conversation that we had, and for the information as well. And we truly wish the best for the Infinite Agency. And if there's ever a time you're in Lubbock and you want to run into a Haboob, come on down. But for our audience, thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. And we will see you next time at Binding Minds Podcast. We'll see you next time.